attention. It says report abuse and block this user. Do you think that it has set social rules? So what happens, imagine this, like what I experienced the first time this person was calling me. Like, who is this person? Shall I talk to him? You know, someone I don't know. You get really freaked out. And then what they do here is reduce the amount of uncertainty by showing you the picture of the other person, telling you can go and see, check him or check her out. That's the other one. And then you say, and then you can also say, just in case, if something goes wrong, you have a governance functionality. You know, report abuse and block the user is a regulatory action in case things don't go well. And so, and notice how this is done with the purpose of providing some symbolic safety, which is something you doubt you're going to have when you communicate on the internet. And then you have this other cluster, this panel on your left, which is provides different tools. You see, it has the vocabulary that the person just studied, unit vocabulary, useful phrases. It also has dictionaries, and it has phrases. You see phrases in your language and in the other language. So you start a conversation, and even if you don't know much, you can start using those prefabricated sentences. But as I said at the beginning, later you run into trouble because when the conversation goes off, and this sentence is wouldn't up anymore, and then you start improvising, or you just get stuck. And it also provides the special characters keyboard for languages that use special characters. So what is the objective of this day? Well, the objective is to facilitate engagement in communication. So you see how this interface is sending a message that eases the possibilities of a person to engage in communication. Even if the person is has a very low level of language, like in my case when I interacted with this person, I had been in class for a week, and I dare interact with this person with a couple of phrases. But it's because when I saw the interface, I said, I don't know, for some reason I think I can do it. But it's because the interface is very friendly and provides all of these semiotic resources to help you ease uncertainty and and the fear of engaging in a conversation with someone you don't know. So you see, and this is supported by the website. You know, saying you can interact on this website through this interface. So that's my second view. The second view of language that I found. There's more examples, but I don't have the time. And then the last one is language as a tree growing in a garden. And then you might be saying, wait, the other two categories were very similar to the theoretical framework you presented, but this one is up. Why? Because I don't know, that's what the data told me. And the data should also talk, I love it because this is the language garden. The language garden is, they say it's a snapshot of your language skills. And this is the interface. So this appears when you enter the website. And what it shows is your identity as a language learner. So on your right, you will see one cluster, which is, it says I speak, right? And you see the metaphor of a tree here. And then what is interesting is that the tree represents the language you're learning, and in this case, the language you speak, in this case, Espanol and English, right? That's my identity. But on the other side, you see the languages you're learning. Here I only have one tree, which is French. I was studying French. And the tree is big. When you start the website, when you register, the tree is like this, a little thing. And as you start doing the units and participating, helping other people, grading stuff, the tree starts growing. and they start giving you some of these animated icons, like a bear, the rainbow, the sun, and they are animated, they move. There's something very interesting here. They portray language as a language. They portray language as a tree that's growing. But if you see, look at the, when it says I speak and I am learning, you see that those are vowel speech? Those are vowel speeches? It's like the tree speaking. It's like they are representing you as a tree too. You know? And they are also representing the language learning as a tree. It's very interesting. So, and this is an ecological metaphor, you know? And I'll tell you a little bit more about this. So the metaphor is language is viewed like in ecology of language as a natural organism. You know, a natural organism that develops. And just as a tree, what does that mean? What does a tree need? A tree needs to be nurtured, right? And on the website, the tree is nurtured by your interaction with other members of the community, by the work you do on learning, on the learning units. And that's basically how language works. You know, language is nurtured when you interact with other people. When you are concerned with when you invest in your learning. So, this one. And what's nice here is that the fact that it considers your L1, because when a person goes to the profile, your profile, the person's going to see your language garden, and then the person's going to say, hey, this person's worked a lot. He's got a lot of animated stuff and trees, and he's got a lot of apples. It means this person's worked a lot. But it also shows the languages you know. It validates the languages you know. So whatever you are, whatever languages you know become a source for language development. You know, unlike some language teaching methods that do not acknowledge your L1. This is sending the message: I acknowledge your own language and the other languages you know. Okay, they are part of this ecological framework, and all of them constitute sources for language development here, because if you know more languages, you will have more interaction with some other people and you'll learn more. Not only about language, but about what it means to speak a language. So I want to close this. This is a happy moment, okay? The conclusions and the implications. And alright, so I like the idea of the ecological metaphor. And when you think, and remember at the beginning I mentioned the concept of nested systems, and I said that is a little hard to understand now. And I was thinking when I thought of the definition that they give when you talk about ecology, they say ecology is a system that within nested systems. Think of that. Language is a system within a nested system. And I was trying to figure that out. I said, well, what is a nest? That's what I thought. Maybe if I go directly to the term, so what's a nest? What's a nest? And so I ran into this because, looking for definitions, not only, if we are multimodal, we could look for definitions in the dictionary, but we could also look for visual definitions, and that's what I did. Instead of going for the written definition, I somehow look for a visual definition of this concept. And then I ran into this one. So how does this relate to ecology? Alright? So you see, the systems are integrated by other systems. How, in order to build this nest, the bird needed to use different materials that come from other systems. And they all conform that nest. So it's a nest of nested systems. You know, yarn, hair, mud, all of those are some other systems. And the bird used them all. And when I think of the website, isn't it exactly the same? It's a website with different systems coming from different times, from different ideologies. And I'd like to cite Bakhtin. He says, in terms of say, semiotic resource systems such as Wusu, is characterized as the coexistence of social ideological contradictions between the present and the past, between different socio-ideological groups in the present, between tendencies, schools, circles, and so forth, all given a bodily form. That bodily form is the website. So what this means in terms of ecology is that semiotic interaction is composed of a system of nested views. Different views of language, different views of learners, users, and learning, with multiple time scales. Look, the structural view of language appeared at the beginning of the 20th century, right? It reached its peak with Chomsky, and then the interactional view came in, and then the constructivist views, and then the ecological views. There are different time scales here that conjoin on the website, and that's what we are if you think of human beings, you know? Our conscience is made up of all the time scales. When we were kids, when we were teenagers, and now we are adults. We're made of all of those time scales. We've forgotten some of that, but we've kept some of that. And then, not only those time scales, but also spatio-temporal things that constitute discursive resonances, and they work in synergy. So that's an interesting thing. You see, even though these three conflicting, but at the same complementary views of language coexist on the website. And this person learned the language, and I have to say, personally speaking, that I learned a lot of French on the website, even though it has this structural section, you know? But there was these other parts of the website that coexisted with that one that helped me improve language. So, it only in the website conjoined views from past and newer views of language, activities from past methods or approaches in language teaching corresponding to different views of language, but they all coexist on the website. Now, that you can improve the website maybe by making it more coherent, yes. But the website is the product of human beings, and human beings are characterized by this, you know, by the coexistence of all of these multiple systems that are contradictory, complementary, and we live with that. And sometimes we're comfortable with it. Sometimes we're uncomfortable, but we cannot change it. Because we say, I cannot change who I am, even though I'm not happy with that, but that's me, so you accept yourself. What implications? So you see, my conclusion is short. The implications. What is the role of culture on Brazil? One of the things that is highly criticized with this website, even with Rosetta Stone and many others, is that they use the same iconography for all the languages they teach. So if you want to teach French, they translate the whole thing, and they will show you the same pictures. You know, if you want to learn Chinese, same thing. Now, but this has big implications when you think of how through the imagery of the website, culture is being constructed. The intercultural speaker is being constructed. all those images are creating stereotypes or reinforcing stereotypes. So what is the impact of having the same imagery for all languages? For example, one of the units talks about the zodiac signs, right? And some cultures don't believe in that. And that's actually, for some people, that's kind of like, that goes against their religion beliefs. So it seems like the website and some of the materials would require more cultural sensitivity. And this has to do with the construction of identity. We need to study more the potential of these websites to promote language learning. We have to see how they, and there's different studies that show some cases they help a lot, some cases it's hard to determine whether people learn or not. And do multimodal semiotic design enhance learning? Research has shown that it does indeed enhance learning. It's not the same when you give students a blank page with a dialogue, you give students a dialogue with images that contextualize the dialogue. And the images provide a tone and an attitude to the dialogue. The colors. Oh, there's a typo there. How to deal with limitations in web research or on social networking sites for language learning. So this is, I'm going to refer to why I did a note of ethnography. Because doing research on these websites is very difficult to get access to data. First, who do you ask for permission? So the website says that the data belongs to the users, right? But then you have to ask permission to the website to use the data of the users. And then they will tell you, you will have to ask the users. How would you react if I tell you, hey, do you want to interact with me? I'm doing research. Alright? That's gonna turn off anybody, okay? So the interaction is not gonna be natural because the person knows you're not a member of the community. That's why I did a note of ethnography in which I became a member of the community. And that limits a lot the analysis because there's many things I wanted to analyze and describe in my study. For example, the conversations I had with people. Because I screen recorded all of the interactions. I have hours and hours of screen recordings of everything I did on the website. And the dialogues I had, the conversations. There's many things to say about that, but I can't cite those conversations. Because I would have had to ask for permission to those people. And then if you say that at the beginning, they're just going to say, no, I'm not into research. And if you say it at the end, that's not ethical. You know? So that's one of the limitations. And that's why, for example, Zorro talks about the researchability of these websites. Can you research them as they are? And for some reason, that's why I focus on the semiotic design of the website. And also, hopefully, if we could get larger samples of users, because there's some research done on a few students. And they analyzed 4, 5, or 18 students, and the analysis is very generic. Because people don't engage in multimodal analysis. It would be great if we could do research with larger samples of students and analyze many other dimensions. And I have to say that I'm doing a project right now. It's an interinstitutional research with Universidad de Bogotá, Universidad UPTC from Tunja, and Universidad Valle. And we're trying 3 different language learning websites. We're asking different questions about identity, language learning, and so on. So I'm trying to pursue this research line by kind of like listening to this limitation that I had and taking a larger sample of users. And I appreciate you staying, and I appreciate if you have any questions. Thank you. That's my son. Like 1 year ago.
Well, thank you, Dr. Álvarez, for what I thought was a very enlightening presentation. It's always, like I said, side note, it's always interesting to see how all the people presenting a dissertation after the work it takes to get it done. I want to open the forum for, I mean, I do have a few questions of my own, but I think it would be nice if we open the room for the grad students in front, and of course the undergrads who are still with us at the back. So, who wants to? Alex?
Professor. Oh, no, it's okay. You can hear me, right? Yes. All right.
Because we are.
We're speaking out.
Good evening. Good evening, Professor.
My question is, when you're analyzing through multimodality, when you're analyzing a page or a site, these pages weren't originally made or created with multimodality in mind. How does that work? Does, do you know what I mean? Sorry.
I actually. What I would say is that these people that develop the website, they are web designers, and they know all of the tricks on how to design these websites. Their thinking is more, how do I design something that's attractive and engaging? So that's why, and this is one of the reasons why linguists have a hard time doing multimodal analysis, because the first principle for you to do multimodal analysis is that you have to expand your disciplinary horizons. Because we know how to do linguistic analysis. Do we know about how to do analysis of color, spatial distribution? So you have to go to those other disciplines and find out what is it that they have in their minds when they design this stuff. They don't design it thinking in terms of pedagogical of our area. Yeah, but the thing is that if we're able to analyze this and come up with principles of good design of pedagogical materials, that would be very enriching. Because the problem is that they fragment, when they design these websites, they fragment the work. Say, okay, these are the contents. You do the web design because, just make it nice. But in our field, since we are the ones dealing with the materials, we should be able to say, okay, I know there are some principles for you to create materials that are not only engaging, but are pedagogically appropriate, that enhance language learning.
Any other questions? Don't be shy.
In that case, I'll do one of my questions. Really question, I was really intrigued by the idea of symbolic safety. Because that sounded very much like social cultural theory. I know they give symbolic violence by Bourdieu. But I would like for you, can you explain to us a little bit what you mean by symbolic safety?
Yeah, I actually didn't take that term from anywhere. I just said, that's how I felt, like at a symbolic level, thinking, okay, so I'm gonna relate to this, something that happened last week. I just began doing the data collection with my group of students at Universidad, Valle. And they're working like Mocha, we're trying that website. And I told them, work on one unit, and then I want you to do chat. Chat with anybody in the community. And one of them who is fast, he finished the unit and then he started chatting, and then he says, oh my God, this guy is asking me to Skype. And he says, I'm afraid. He says, que miedo. And I was shocked. I said, wait, why don't you, this is the networking generation, you shouldn't be afraid of this. That's what I thought. But for some reason, for these students, there wasn't any kind of safety to engage in that interaction on Skype with this student. He didn't feel safe. And when I was doing, that's kind of like how I felt the first day I interacted with this person on my first experience with these websites. I was, when he wanted me to do video chat, I felt like I didn't feel confident on the one hand, but also I didn't feel safe. You know, even though he's on the other side, I didn't feel safe. I don't know, and that's why I thought I came up with that idea of symbolic safety, because it's symbolic, but the website is create that idea that you're safe. Yes, it creates that idea through the interface. To some extent it works, but if you run into someone who is gross or anything, well, you run into that person, and then you'll have to just deal with that person. And it happened to me. And then you just block the person, and then you feel like, okay, this person is not gonna call me anywhere anytime again. So that's what I don't know if this answers your question, or if you were looking for a more technical explanation, but it's more from the feeling that it creates. That is, it's symbolic. You know, it's symbolic. There's nothing that's gonna assure like somebody there protecting you. Nobody's there. But the interface creates that sensation that you're safe.
Are there any questions from you guys? No? None at all?
Well, then in that case, what I'm going to propose is, I have some questions, but they are more related to the research itself. So I just want to suggest that we sit here, right, making it very comfy. Kind of break protocol. Oh, yeah, let's break protocol because. We're gonna break protocol, and I think no, because here's the thing, José, some of the folks in the audience are either working on their proposals or struggling with their thesis. Either way. And there are so many interesting things in your presentation that I think, because right now there's only one person who can say, I survived, and that's Claudia over there in the middle of the crowd. The rest of them are dealing with this. But there's one important question I want to start with, and it's this story we get to tell to the data. Because we were having this conversation during lunch, and how the traditional route seems to be chapter 4, findings. Category 1, blah, 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 blah. Category 2, blah, 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 blah. And by category 3, your committee members are sleeping because they're bored. And what I'm saying is, I found that there's an interesting story to tell. So the question is, how did you make sense of the data? And how were you able to figure out what story you wanted to tell?
All right. The data, when you analyze data, in this case, I have to say that it's impossible for you to do the pure grounded approach people speak about. You know, grounded approach is creating theory from the ground, and for you to create theory from the ground, the best situation is that you're not contaminated by previous theory. You see? And when I did the analysis, you see that one category is language is a structural system, you know? And that's an a priori category, because it was described in the theoretical review that I did, you know? And when I looked at the website, I said, yeah, well, I didn't find any other way to call it. I could have called it differently, but I said, well, language is a structure, and that's what I'm going to call it. The second category came out from my journal. And I was really biased by the idea that the website was totally structural, because that's what I had read. But then when I read my journal, there was this recurring term, interaction, everywhere. I said, wait, is it that really this website promotes interaction and sees language as interaction? And then I went to the other source of data, which was the blog, and the blog had some information that also leaned or kind of like informed me that they had this idea that language is also interaction, not only the grammar and all of that. And so the journal helped me a lot to figure this out. And then I said, and what about the website? And say, and then I was always thinking of how the chat was so important. And say, the chat. And I went to look at the chat, and I said, actually the chat is what lures you into engaging in interaction, the structure itself. You know? And I said, well, this is a category that's speaking by itself. And then I didn't talk about this, but something that was very motivating to me was the garden. Because the garden uses the strategy of gamification. They give you berries when you do lessons. They are always rewarding you, and you feel happy when you say like, you've earned this, and now you can buy one more animated icon. And you say, yeah, and look, at the beginning, I am not that kind of person, you know, like I look kind of serious. But when I read my journal, like, I wrote stuff like, oh, I'm excited because I got this, the cow and all of this. And then I say, yeah, this is becoming like something that motivates me to come back to the website, you know, and to see, and then I say, why is it attracting me so much? And then I say, well, okay, on the first hand is, semiotically speaking, that it is there, anytime you open the website, it is the first thing that shows, spatial distribution, and it's very colorful and it's animated. And that's multimodality at play, you know, luring you into. And then I said, and then I started thinking of this, and I said, well, yeah, language is this tree that I'm trying to take care of every day. And then there's also this thing that they say, if you don't do anything on the website, bugs are gonna eat your garden, and that really happens. When you don't work, they send you a message, bugs are eating your tree or your garden, and you go and they're eating your tree. So it was, and then I said, yeah, so this tree represents my language, and I want to take care of it. So language is a growing tree in a garden, and that's how that metaphor came out. Okay, so it's in part emergent and in part a prioristic. You know, some of those categories were already there because I knew, but some others were because the data spoke to me. That's the best way to say.
Well, it starts answering the question, you know, in the sense that you gave us an idea of how you started weaving the ideas, but how did you finally decide the narrative that comprised the findings?
I don't know. Minutes to write it down dissertation. No.
That's true. Well, that is true, and that's what happens to us when we're the doctor, but yeah, it's cool. It's good. Let's be more score.
I'm sorry about that. I don't know, the narrative comes from, I would say that the narrative comes from an idea that, and I actually say that in the introduction to the dissertation, that there's three big dimensions that chase teachers throughout their career. And those dimensions are, what is language, what is learning, and how do they materialize in the ways I teach, right? And I say, if you are able to put to dialogue those three things in a coherent way, that's great. It might take you many years to be able to do that, right? And then whenever you see a teaching material, that teaching material is speaking to those three things. And there's the identity of the teacher. What I think language is, learning is, how I do teach it, and how I have to negotiate how the material positions me as a teacher, how it represents language and learning. And that's a big struggle, you know, because you might be very communicative, but you run into this material that's not communicative, And then you have to make decisions. Do I change it? Do I add? What do I do in order to make it coherent to the ways I think? And I think we, every day in our language classes, we struggle with those three categories. And that's what, when I saw these websites and I said, this is becoming very common, there's millions of people learning English on these websites. Language learning is heading towards that direction. You know, informal learning, virtual learning environments. And I said, you know, as a language teaching material that I would like to use in my classes, I would like to figure out what this is proposing and how this draws some conclusions for example, material design. Because material design does not always think of these categories. And I think that's the whole narrative of my dissertation. That's why I wondered about those three big questions.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, how to weave. I think that's what it comes down to, is how you weave what you have with the personal side of what you want to say, and how that materializes in chapter. I think that's the best way to frame it, because again, we have in this audience a group of very novice researchers, and they are trying to figure out on this side of this corner, you have a group of people who are trying to figure out what they would like to do that is innovative, is interesting, is not traditional. And on the other corner, you have the people who are now going through the data collection, doing the analysis, and some of them already trying to do the writing. So that's where the question came up.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say that through the research, when I ran into the idea of ecology, it really helped me explain a lot that maybe we don't necessarily have to have these very clear-cut categories in life. Because this website is an example that all of these categories that might be contradicting, they might also become complementary. Yes? And that taught me to some extent that maybe if we're able to calibrate those three dimensions to a point in which we feel happy, that'd be great. That we might not be able to put it to work coherently, because really, almost nothing in this world that's a system can work coherently. Maybe that's part of the nature of human beings, that things don't work necessarily coherently. And that's why at the end, I gave a lot of thought of this idea of really what's ecology? You know, what's a nested system? Why is it too complex to explain? And I think the bird, that video clip, tells the whole thing, you know? That's who we are, you know? As academics, we build our nests with the twigs and with the yarns of all of those theories, and we try to make meaning of all of those theories and take a side and all of that. And sometimes we're just divided. We don't know if this is right or not. We're just waiting for a signal, for a sign, something that tells us this is the right way to go.
Wonderful. I wanted to move, just kind of start giving this a sense of closure, back to your methodology, because you said you used ethnography. I mean, I actually used Multimodal myself, and I used self-study, ethnography, and self-reflexivity. And the question is, well, there are some severe criticisms to the methodology. Some people say that self-study and ethnography, sometimes it's just a glorified exercise of narcissistic self-contemplation, or just a glorified exercise in navel-gazing, which may be the case, but not necessarily all the time. Having done this dissertation, what potential do you see to incorporating ethnographic frameworks into research in our field of second language studies?
Yeah, I am aware of all of those criticisms, and I actually was very wary of doing it, you know. But I also had these limitations as far as I could have done the website alone, you know, and said I just analyzed the interface. but I said I also need to know the experience of the website. I cannot take any other. I said I'm not gonna take any subjects or individuals to do it, and I don't want to be invasive on the website, and so that's why I decided to do it. At the beginning, you are very self-conscious of everything you do, and you sometimes are over-analytic, and you do many things. But that's why I think that these other ethnographies need to be done on longer, or the research needs longer periods of time, in which at some point you just get used to be writing about it without double thinking of it. At the beginning, but then at the end, I had these experiences on the website, and I was just writing. I had a lot of also second thoughts about it, because most of the ethnographies are very well, beautifully written. And that's one of the criticisms, because these people write like they were writing literature. With all of these metaphors and beautiful. And I was like, where do I place my writing? Because I am not a literature expert. I don't write that kind of, I don't do that kind of writing. But there's different ways to do ethnography, and there's one that's, it's just a simple writing of your experiences, and that's what I aimed for, writing my own experiences, without trying to be so much analytical. In some cases, I just told my stories, and as the time went on, I noticed that my entrances were more genuine, rather than the researcher there doing the job. They were more genuine of the language user rather than the researcher. And that's why, and how did I realize that? When I analyzed data, when I saw what I wrote, I was like, wow, this was like almost 3 months ago. I don't know, how did I write this? Why did I write it? Why was I thinking? And so on. In many cases, I needed to go back to the recordings and double check what is it that I was thinking at the moment, because my writing was sketchy, Yeah, so, but I think it has potential. I think the class, especially my class, we've been moving towards the idea of the social term, right? And the social term in applied linguistics is the acknowledgement as the individual whose insights are also valuable. The student's insights are also very valuable for their own learning. Some people call it metacognition, but from our social perspective, is the student not thinking of their learning, but thinking of some other categories. And that's why I think, even though this is criticized, we also have to give space to the individual who is doing the research.
As you were talking, I actually was writing the word positionality on my notepad, because I think you touched on a very important issue that comes up when we start researching our own classroom and our own practice. When do I look at the classroom as a teacher? When do I look at the classroom as a researcher? When do I look at my students as my students, the individuals I'm working with, and when do I look at them as data? And I think that is one of the tensions that we all face when we start looking at our own practice. Where do I look at what I wrote? And I said I actually recently did an ethnography of my evolution as a research educator. And kind of so when I read my syllabi, am I reading my syllabi as the person who wrote it, as the professor who wrote it, or as the researcher who's critically looking at this? And you touched on a very important issue that I think we all must remember, regardless of the method we use, whether it's ethnographic or action research, and I think it's that there is some rigor in collecting data. Sometimes ethnography can become this self-contemplation exercise because of the weak data that we collect. But you prove the point of strong data can lend itself for a strong or ethnographic analysis. So I think that is the key to this. We can look at classrooms, but then we have to think very carefully about the kinds of data that we are collecting. And I think that's kind of the key to this. I mean, I really see a lot of potential in oceanography, and I hope eventually we can get some of our students to start doing that rigorously and systematically. Because sometimes that's a problem with this literary approach. I mean, it's okay to do the narrative thing, but when you turn it into a fairy tale, that's when it becomes dangerous. Alex.
So I have a question. How dangerous is it? I mean, I think you did it in a beautiful way. How you engaged with the program, with how can I say, with the course itself, with the, yeah, I mean, basically became part of that community, and you were learning the language that you were studying, the whole thing. Anyway, how dangerous is it for the researcher to become so involved as far as having like a mindset already, from not so much, because one thing is looking at something from the outside and another being inside, which I think is great. But can you almost have a biased opinion as to some things, or?
Yeah, that's a very interesting discussion, and that's actually with the crisis of the natural sciences, that claim that in order for you to be able to be objective, you have to use an ethic approach. Stay outside of the subject of inquiry, so that you can describe him in a very objective way, which leads me to very subjective ways of describing, because you don't know what you're talking about because you're an outsider. And as far as human beings, really, you can't know a human being saying that you're observing it from an ethic perspective. You have to be able to interact with that person. And of course, that's what we acknowledge as researchers. That we're not looking for objectivity, because that doesn't exist in the first place. That doesn't exist, right? In a reaction to natural sciences, we're going to use emic approaches, in which we engage with the community or with whatever we're doing research on. We're going to see what is they think. We're going to try to. That's why we talked about the concept of positionality, which is describing. In research, you describe, okay, what is my position here? How can I find borderlines between what I can do and what I can't do that will bias not only my view, but that will change the person I'm doing research on, or the people, based on my actions. And in ethnography, that's a big issue. What you can do or what you can't do, that's going to change the behavior of the others. You try not to be so intrusive, but it's assumed that you're going to change the behavior of the others. It's like when you go to observe class. You say, yeah, stay at the back, don't do anything. That's going to change the environment of the class, because even the teacher is going to change. You see? So there's no way for you to escape from that. But being self-reflective about your positionality is what will help you distinguish what are the effects or not of your presence in a research context.
Can you expand a little bit on that? Because as Aldemar was saying, all research is subjective. The whole notion of objectivity in research is moot. It's a moot point, especially when you do qualitative research. In fact, and I was just recently reading one of the nice things about my job is I get to read everybody's work. And it's one of the difficult things of my job. I get to read everybody. I have to read everybody's work. And again, the beauty of it is I get to read everybody's thesis before you submit them. And as I read them, I reflect on the things that we need to give back to you to help you improve on your research. And sometimes you may have noticed this in students sometimes, that they start saying, I quote, the researcher went to the institution and interviews were conducted, and I start asking myself, okay, first of all, who is the researcher? Why are you speaking about yourself in the third person? And second of all, why are you saying interviews were conducted when the passive voice doesn't really acknowledge that you did it? And we have this, and it's kind of into the sense of this fear of contaminating or biasing. I mean, all research is biased because you all have biases. Whether you're a male or a female, whether you're single or you're married, whether you have children, whether you have puppy dogs, whether you're white or Afro-Colombian, who you are, and I think you remember those concept the first assignment we did, who are you? That when I taught that research class, and I got the first line is, who are you? And when I asked them that question, they're like, what? You want me to write about what? About me? Like, of course, because you are doing the research. So instead of saying the researcher wanted to say, I conducted 6 interviews. Because using those literary moves or those grammatical and tactical Jedi mind tricks doesn't actually reduces your value as a researcher. So I would say, in this sense of positionality, don't be afraid to say, I did. Because, yeah, but doesn't that just like make me a little presumptuous, a little arrogant? No. Didn't you go to the field? Didn't you interview people? Didn't you analyze the data? Then why can't you say that you analyzed data and you wrote it and you found this and you have a conclusion for us? It just, again, all research is biased. All you can do, you cannot erase bias. All you can do is minimize it.
And this is also, this rests upon the presumption that research in the natural sciences tradition, quantitative research tradition, that research must be generalizable. You know, that it could be used and applied for other contexts. And in qualitative research, that's not what we are aiming for. We're just going to say, look, this is the research I did. I'm showing you the picture of a specific spatio-temporal dimension, some specific time, some specific period, one specific me at the time, and this is what I'm showing you. I'm not intending you for you. I'm intending you to generalize this or anything. People can draw on your results, you know, for further research, but it's not about replicating it because it might not happen exactly the same. And also, if we're talking about reliability, there's many other ways you reduce those possibilities. You know, doing academia is about reading what some other people have done. You know, and that also gives you reliability. If you're coming up with results that are really off, you know, you say, well, this is really awkward that my results are showing this and some people have said this. Something must be wrong here methodologically or something's going on. And that helps you balance a little bit sense of reality and how reliable you are in the ways you're handling data or your research process.
I think that's a very nice way to sum up the discussion, the presentation today. Just one final question before we send everybody for a coffee break and get ready for the next class. What advice? I usually like to ask this question where we want to be open lecture series because it's and the reason I like to ask this question is because every presenter we had in the past 13, I can't believe we really have 13 lectures since we started the program. They are all experienced researchers. They are people who have a trajectory, who have published and engaged in research. They've had failures and successes. They've had really good studies and really crappy ones because we've all had we have a really good paper that was published and we got a really crappy paper that we're still wondering how did that get published. We got those two, and everything we have is in that range. And on the other side, we have young novice researchers, people who are learning to do research. And they have questions, because we have to advise them. You have Milburn, I have one students, and Marcel in the back has quite an army of students as well. And we all have to deal with this thing. So again, we have a seasoned, experienced researcher with a track record of success because you've got publications. So that means you have a track record of success. The dissertation, that means you have a very good track record of success. What advice, from the perspective of someone, of an experienced researcher, would you give to this crowd in terms of how they would engage with research now and hereafter?
Wow. Okay, so research was created with the purpose. I mean, there's different kinds of research. One of the research approaches that is favored in language teaching is research that solves problems that are close to you. Some other kind of research is more theoretically based because you want to construct something bigger, which is why I did this, you know? That was my first stepping stone to continue working on that. And so see what kind of research you want to do first. Do you want to solve something that's in your own local context? And the other thing is the language teaching field has progressed a lot. And that you folks are getting a lot of insights and input in this program. Language teaching is more social. We're trying to engage students from a social perspective, more than linguistic perspective. I know you have all of these concerns about how do I make my students better language speakers, you know, like how do they speak better, how do they write better? And I say, that's great, but that is trying to answer the question of how to improve writing in my classes. It's a question that's been asked 1,000 times, and there's 1,000 articles written on that. And it's not bad you're doing it, because it's your own research process, your own development as a researcher. But what we're saying is that the field nowadays is telling you, you do that, but explore something that's more significant, that tells you more about it. Instead of saying, how do they improve speaking? Okay, so you do the work on speaking, but explore how do they construct their identity while doing all of these tasks on improving their speaking. What do they want to write about? What does it tell about their idea of culture? You could also relate it to the concerns that we have in Colombia nowadays. So use English language for something that's meaningful. I always say, if you want to get students to learn English or whatever language, meaningful engagement for meaning making. Again, so I go back to this, you know, think of this kind of the big questions that I have in my mind when I did this research: language, learning, and how I do it. So I say, write dimension the research you're doing, because that's the traditional path. I know that's why you're interested, because that's what you see every day, but I know there are many other interesting things that can be explored at the same time that you're improving the writing and the speaking and all of that. Because it's obvious that when you say, what is the impact of doing lessons on speaking in my students' speaking level, and then at the end, of course they improve speaking. But that's not going to tell you anything, you know? They have more in their heads. They have more in their heads. All right, so it's an invitation, you know, to expand the possibilities of research. All research is doable. Listen, when I began the research, I thought, no way, I'm not going to be able to do this. I don't know anything about how to do multimodal analysis. I didn't know anything. I had to do a lot of stuff to be able to perform, to conduct the study, and also to make people believe that it was researchable. Okay? And I could do it. And it seems like now it's taking off. So whatever you want to do, have in mind, talk. The other advice is talk. Academia is built on the basis of dialogue, about team. Don't keep it to yourself. In our world, we always talk when I talk to you, the first thing that I ask you is, what are you working on? And I happened today with somebody, I said, what are you working on? I said, well, I'm working on this code. And I was in our academic world, when I say, what are you working on? You say, well, I'm doing this research, I'm working on my students, you know, all of these things. You know, talk to people, you know, what are you working on? What's your topic? And then get ideas from people. Get ideas. It's about having a cup of coffee, talking, discussing, and reach those frameworks. Don't be afraid of saying, hey, I have this in mind. What do you think about it? That's what we do all the time. Have critical friends. Somebody who's going to beat you up every time you ask. But you say, okay, cool, I'm learning from this, you know? So those are pieces of advice that I would consider. If you have an idea of research, talk to the person, talk to some people, and they will give you ideas, and you will be able to pull it off. Be open.
I think as a closing one, I think the idea of talk to each other, it's a lesson that we leave to you as a point of thought, because that is a lesson that us, who are this new, kind of the new wave of scholarship in the country, we are learning that we have to do. Because sometimes we tell you, talk to each other, but we don't talk to each other. But I think we've learned the lessons from the past, and we're trying to build it. That's why we invite someone like José Aldemar to come and join us, and talk to us from his perspective, and then eventually we start building bridges across programs, because that's another thing that we have to do in order to grow this scholarship. So I think a round of applause for Dr. Álvarez is more than well.